to Love Yourself with Pat Bell. This is a podcast designed with you in mind. We expect that this podcast will be the solution to the problems in urban America. We want to make a change. We want a difference. We don't want to use this podcast as a way to just talk about the problems that we have, the problem of crime, the problem of poverty. We want to have this podcast coming to you for the purpose of making a difference, bringing solutions, saving our lives, reducing crime, and building our communities. We especially designed this podcast in order to bring down the criminal prison numbers. We want to reduce prison numbers all over America. We want to reduce crime in urban cities across this nation. We owe it to our ancestors. We owe it to those who shedded their blood, sweat, and tears for us to be surviving today. So we want to thank you for tuning in to Love Yourself with Pat Bell. I am Pat Bell, and I want to thank you for giving us your attention, giving us your ears. And we're especially wanting to get this podcast into the prisons here in Birmingham, Alabama, where we are streaming live. We want to make sure that the prisons here, the jails, all over America, we want to get this podcast in your hands, because we don't expect next year this time to have the same number of prisoners. We want to reduce that, and we're designing this podcast in a way that you can get a difference in gainful employment. We don't want to talk about the lame duck, just a salary increase. We want to talk about gainful employment, careers, benefits that are going to get heads of the family in a position to do what you need to do for your children and for your spouses. We are just so grateful that this is not just the ordinary type of a podcast. We are going to make a difference. We want to do things in a different manner. And we're going to bring guests who are just as committed to this objective that we have put in place for this podcast. We are bringing the best minds that we can bring to help you, and help us and help ourselves, because we believe that when we become aware of our own identity, we will appreciate who we are, and we will respect what we are, and we will improve conditions in our surroundings and our environment. And for you, because we love you, we love ourselves, we have a special guest for you today who's known in the community of Smithfield as simply Smithfield. He's a radio warrior. He's an activist. He's a grassroots activist. And he's brilliant with literature that will help the inner city here in Birmingham, Alabama. And we're expecting that the citizens in other urban cities, such as St. Louis, Chicago, Baltimore, we're expecting that what we're doing here in Birmingham, Alabama, will spread to you, and you will catch fire and have the desire to be the solution and not the problem. That's what we're doing with this podcast, Love Yourself with Pat Bell. We are becoming the solution to our problems. And without any delay, we want you to stay right there and meet the man his real name is Willie Bussey. But we simply call him in the hood Smithfield.
That's why I said ain't no love in the heart of the city. Ain't no love in the heart of town. Ain't no love, and it sure is a pity. Ain't no
and only Willie Bussey, better known in the grassroots world and on the radio, talk radio, as simply Smithfield. Smithfield, thank you for taking out the time to come and to be an encouragement to our audience.
The first thing I'd like to say is thank you for inviting me, Ms. Bell. I really appreciate that. I've said this many times over the airways. The people, as some people call the common people, or certain types of people, that they try to suppress our voices intentionally. We don't basically have a voice. There are even people who claim to represent and speak for us. They really don't speak for us. Again, they're too busy, like the system, trying to suppress our voices. I brought with me just a few books that I would encourage the young people to read. I remember I had a college professor told me that the old scholars are much better than, they're more prolific than the new scholars are. They really do their work. People like A.J. Rogers didn't even have a college degree. I've seen his books on college campuses, black and white college campuses. Arthur, A.J. Rogers didn't even have a college degree. Prolific intellectuals, historians, and so forth. I got this name as being a radio warrior, and I definitely dislike it. I'm a philosopher, because we as black people don't supposed to think or be able to think, and we're supposed to be, the males especially, went into the physical thing, mucho macho and athleticism, But there is such thing as what is called scholar athletes. You see them in the paper. They're on the honor roll, but they're athletes too. Men and women, and that's a great thing. I guess it goes back to European culture of the Greeks, healthy body, healthy mind, to mind and body. I guess we're going to talk about self-love.
That's right.
How is this all tied into economics, job opportunities, and so forth? It's funny. Everything in this society is political. Jobs and the lack of jobs is political. What this has to do with love or self-love. It took me years to read the autobiography of Malcolm X because that book was that thick. I broke down and read it. And then I read some pamphlets by him and heard tapes and speeches. One thing that stood out, Malcolm said this, it's a theme in a lot of black writers, whether it's Malcolm X, the Black Panthers, or many writers, is self-love, but even self-hatred, the opposite. Malcolm X said one of the worst things whites ever did was teach blacks to hate themselves. Now, how do you do this? You can do this directly or indirectly. You can do it through programming in the schools. I'll give an example. When they taught us everything, whether it's math, history, whatever, it always started with the Romans and the Greeks. But I tell a lot of educators, I tell them a lot of times, children aren't stupid. They may not know the truth, but they know when you're not telling the truth, instinctively. When they taught us that math started with the Greeks, we know that there were Africans, Chinese, Japanese, but it all started with the Romans and the Greeks. Well, we didn't totally buy that. Or we told the teachers, because we had to take tests, what they wanted to hear at our age. We didn't buy it. History always started with the Romans and the Greeks. So I came up with a little ditty. In the beginning, God created Romans and Greeks. No. But when I was in high school, things happened to me personally, like the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. I knew something was wrong in society. Something was seriously wrong. And I noticed how we as black people reacted to our environment, and even many times to our relationship with each other. Something wasn't right about it. So the social sciences, they only basically taught us history, but things like psychology, human behavior. I didn't get this in high school, but I was concerned about these things in high school because I knew something seriously wrong. So I'd go to the library and I'd read books on psychology, which a lot of people say is something. No, psychology basically is physiology. It's physiology. It's human beings' reaction basically to their environment or to an outside stimulus.
So are you saying to us, Smithfield, that if we love ourselves, some of our problems will be eradicated? Are you saying to me today that if we focus totally on systemic racism, that we are doing ourselves an injustice, we will never get to the solution in our communities, just concentrating on systemic racism and not dealing with this lack of self-love that we need to embody?
Well, there is a relationship between systemic racism and self-love, and you can't talk about, if you notice I mentioned self-hatred. See, because through systemic racism, we're taught that we're worthless. And the sad part about it, you see, the study of human behavior teaches us that there are many things that are conscious, but there are many things that are unconscious. When you teach your people that they are worthless, and they accept this, that leads to self-hatred, not self-love. This has been done subliminally through the schools, religion. God cursed us. See, these type of programs, intentional and systematically, the way we're treated by society leads to self-hatred.
Okay, but look, here in Birmingham, our parents, you went to Parker, I went to Hayes. Our parents in the 60s stood in front of Bull Connor's dogs and said, no more Jim Crow.
That's right.
Here it is now in the 21st century. What are we going to say to the generation coming after us? Are we going to say systemic racism is the reason you still don't have African American studies in the Birmingham school system at the level that it should be? One of the things our parents did immediately after they removed the Jim Crow law was to begin to put African Americans in the Birmingham Board of Education. We've had approximately 10 superintendents of our own ethnicity, and yet in the suburbs here, the students have had an opportunity to study African American studies. They've taken the Swahili language. Never has Swahili been taught in the city schools here.
You see, Ms. Bell, you ask good questions that we don't like to talk about, discuss, but is at the heart of our problem. What happened? What happened to that generation? What happened to those teachers? What happened to those parents? I have seen, and I tell people all the time, the teachers don't teach like they used to. They don't have the concern for their own children like they used to. I know enough to know, Pat, and you do too, the preachers don't preach like they used to. Parenting is not like it used to be. Now, when you talk about self-love, it has to be learned, but then there is something. It starts in the home. We know this. When others value themselves in their own kind. And when they don't, a lot of times, they're not even unconscious of it. Now, I'm giving them, well, sometimes there are certain principles. For example, all social scientists understand conditioning, two types, operant conditioning and classical conditioning. Operant conditioning and classical conditioning. I knew as a teenager that this society was going to try to destroy our culture, which subliminally taught us to love and value yourself. You see. Now, what this has to do with programming? Well, Stoker put it like this. I'll tell you what happened. See, he saw certain things too. Stoker said the whites take the scum of our people and put them in leadership positions. You mentioned those superintendents. I come up in a community where you have doctors, lawyers, businessmen, teachers, ministers, and hustlers. You know, we know the hustle game. Well, we know the hustle game. You know, they go from city to city hustle. We got professionals do that. Do they care about the community? Do they really care about the education of their children and black people? No. They care about their contract. You know, stay there as long as you can, do nothing, let them buy you out. Go to another city, do the same thing. You see, it is parents. Now, one of the books I was going to mention, and I never saw a picture of it, but believe it or not, about a week ago on PBS, they showed these two authors. They were psychiatrists, black psychiatrists. The book is called Black Rage. Dr. Carr and Dr. Greer goes into the details of, let's say, self-love and self-hatred. And it starts with, many of y'all have heard about the Willie lynched up, where the black female is highlighted in there and focused on by society. But they go into detail, these black psychiatrists, in dealing with self-love and self-hatred. They talk about the fact that many black females don't have the self-love that they should have. They have, and this is, but it's deep. It goes back to the days of slavery. When you had pregnant women who lined up, males demeaned and destroyed in front of them, these emotions, these feelings, when they're pregnant, are transmitted down to the baby. And it affects their concept of who and what they are. It's unnatural. And you want to talk about insanity. When you are forced to give up your child, maybe at 10 years old, to be sold off, that has affected self-love among black people. Not only, what effect has this had to this day? We don't have the family togetherness that we should. The roots, the lives in slavery, goes on into Jim Crow, where actually black males weren't allowed to, through the economic system. See, you mentioned the economic system didn't allow us to provide, to protect our families like we wanted to, like we really wanted to. That was, you talk about institutional racism is related. The laws, the practice, the customs, from the banks to the employers, law enforcement was there to basically keep us in our place. And even to this day, everybody knows the history of this.
So we've got to get down to the real nitty gritty. In other words, this lame duck talking, particularly from politicians who are telling us, oh, just get $15 an hour. Yet, the same ones who are offering you $15 an hour, they're working on their 401ks, their pension plans. This is a game that's being played, and when you don't have the core of the family stable, you are helping to create crime and throwing this lame duck narrative out there is not going to bring about changes, and throwing out who brought in Corona. All of this is insignificant to to the solution that is going to change the situation in our voting districts.
You
We
know,
don't want to talk about this lame duck stuff.
you know, as I wrote this list, I'm glad you mentioned that. You mentioned this phenomenon of crime. You mentioned this phenomenon of crime. I remember some years ago, I go to like thrift stores and I go to the book section. And I picked up this is a textbook. The title of the textbook, you hear politicians talk about this. You heard a lot, Nixon, Reagan. They always, which is a code word for blacks, how you actually contain them. You contain them socially, economically, through the use of institutional powers, like practices of the banks not to loan black business people money.
Is that red lining?
Yeah, red line. Now, and everybody knows, and Elder Cleveland's book, So Nice, which I mentioned, he tells you, the police really, they take their orders, basically, and their practices from the business community. From the business community. This is a textbook, the title is called, you talk about law and order, say, who's law and what order? Now you get into the class, and you really get into to really what happened. Elder Cleveland's book, he tells you so on life. So we as Panthers, we were known for having a shootout with the police, but we always knew it was those little white men who carried attaché cases, wore book brother suits, went into the corporate buildings in the inner cities every day, were our real enemies. They communicated to the blacks through the police. And we Panthers, we just communicated back to them through the police. Everybody hear people talk about police unions. The unions have no power in relationship to the business community. The business community telling unions what to do and what not to do.
And when we look at the consumers, we know who the mass consumers are in this country.
They call us suckers, you know.
Right. So when you are the consumer, you have more power than you realize. So
Exactly. Then you realize.
So part of this love yourself has to do with identity, learning your own, learning where your power is. If you have enough power to spend all of this money, then why not direct it back to your own businesses, to your own Smithfield, East Birmingham, Collegeville? You're spending too much money sending it out when you're not establishing stores, waiting for people to come to your neighborhood to open up a convenience store.
Ms. Bell, you use a word, it appears to be off the start. You used the word a few minutes ago, and it goes back to some information that I remember. It was three principles when I was studying psychology as a teenager on my own. You mentioned identity. And that was one of the principles of self-love. It's knowing who you are. It's knowing who you are. And knowing who the people, your mother, father, your foreparents, your classmates, your neighbors, that identity, it comes from who you are, and you understand, emanates to others. That was the first premise of a healthy individual. And if the individual isn't healthy, the group is not healthy. Identity.
Self-identity.
And yes, knowing who you are. And the next one was self-love. This self-love, your girl, the greatest love of all.
Oh, yeah.
What's her name?
Oh, yeah.
You can't love nobody else unless you love yourself.
That's right.
That's right. That's the greatest love. And it emanates from yourself to your group. And slavery destroyed a lot of that among us. That group love,
But
which emanates from the self. And that's what, see, if you love yourself, you respect yourself. You have to have self-love. And I hear brothers talk about it a lot. Then they say survive. Well, you can't survive as an individual. There is individual survival, but then there's collective. There is collective survival as a group. You see, all civilized people use that word. You use that word a lot. All civilized people, they know that individual
existence,
survival. Only a few species of animals, they're only concerned about themselves. But human beings, you have to organize collectively. Group survival exceeds individual concerns and survival.
Now, one of the reasons I invited you, you told me about a song. I've not heard about it, but by Roy C. You said you were in the Air Force, and this is something we want to impart to the podcast viewers. Tell us a little bit about this song.
You know, related to what, as the last poet say, I used to lay down, when I was in the military, I turned the lights out and listened to jazz. And when you listen to jazz, certain feelings and thoughts come to you. You time travel. You see, people think I'm crazy. Yeah, they say he live in the past, but I also live in the present. And I can also look into the future. And that frightens people. And I ain't the only one. A lot of us can do this. There's spiritual gifts that God gives all people and our people. And I remember I heard this record on the radio in Warner Robins, Georgia. And I went down and I bought it because, I could feel it. Now, I've never been a slave, but I can feel the experience that they had, and it's directly tied into my existence here, and it gives me knowledge and insight as to where I should be headed into the future. But it has to do with identity, knowing who you are, and loving yourself and your kind.
So we're going to play that song as we are getting ready to end our interview. And while we're playing that song by Roy C., you say it was in Macon, Georgia?
Warner Robins, about a few miles out of Macon, yeah.
And you were also in the Air Force
Yeah, I was in the military
time.
when I heard it.
And then you introduced it to me, and when I heard it, I says, how in the world could I have lived all of these decades and not have heard a song like this that talks about my own heritage, my own culture, my own existence in the United States of America? And it's entitled,
I wasn't there, but I can feel the pain.
I Can Feel the Pain.
You go to that memorial in Montgomery, you can understand that they probably should need to make it their theme song.
The theme song.
Our leaders, they're not going to build a memorial. They're too busy chasing the dollar bill.
Yeah, well, the people who have called themselves our leaders have actually made themselves their own elitist. Because when we need real answers, we go to the grassroots. We know who the grassroots people are. We understand the warriors in our community, and they know when it's time to make a change, they better come to those that they consider the ordinary, and as you said, the ones they have suppressed. So.
Well, see, Ms. Bell, we the people realize that, especially this new class of politicians, they were created. They were only created as a reaction to the power that we the people have. They're not going to solve our problems. See, we know that. Matter of fact, there was a book called Black Awakening in Capitalist America.
Author, you remember the author of that?
I can't think of the author. But what they did, they went and created a privileged class of Negroes, a money class. Now this class of Negroes will be used as a buffer zone. Now I haven't talked about a certain phenomenon in our community, which is a caste system. It's real. See, they once had a caste system, and they still have very much. And now they have a class system of money privileged Negroes to create the division between the masses.
And the class.
Yes, and the rich, the super rich.
Well, that day is over. We owe it to the blood of our foreparents. They stood on the front lines right here in Birmingham in front of Bull Connor's dogs, And Smithfield, we have a generation after us. We want them to have more than what our foreparents gave us. What they stood for here with Dr. King in Birmingham, we have to give the next generation. And it starts with identity, it starts with self-love, it starts with taking that power of that consumer power and turning it into economic empowerment in your communities. Thank you.
I wasn't there, hey, when they drove the slaves from the ship, and I wasn't there, no, hey, when they whipped my great-great-grandfather with the whip, but oh, I can feel the pain. Lord have mercy, I can feel the pain. Yeah, yeah, I can feel it, I can feel it, I can feel the pain, yes I can, and I wasn't there, no, hey, when they raped my great-great-great-grandmother, and I wasn't there, oh no, Lord, when she cried out for help, oh I can feel the pain, early in the morning I can feel the pain, yeah, yeah, I can feel it, I can feel it, I can feel the pain, yes I can, I can still hear the slaves moaning, as they slowly walk down the gangplank from the ship, and all I could do, Lord, all I could do was stand there and cry. Lord, 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 oh, oh, Lord, the God Almighty, oh, I can feel the pain. Yes, I can. I said I can feel the pain. Lord, Lord, oh, I can feel it. I can feel it. I can feel the pain. Yes, I can. They locked up one of our black sisters not long ago. Angela Davis was her name. Oh, yeah. I said they handcuffed her and they took off to jail. Oh, yes, they did. And I want to say, I wasn't there, but I can feel the pain. Yeah, yeah, Lord, Lord, I can feel the pain. My, oh, I can feel it. I can feel it. Oh, I can feel it. I can feel the pain. Oh, yeah. I wasn't there when they shot Malcolm X. Oh, I can feel it. I can feel the pain. Oh, Lord, I've never been a slave, but I can feel it. I can feel the pain. Yeah, Lord, I said I can feel it. Oh, I can feel it. I can feel the pain. When they shot Martin Luther King, Lord, I said I can feel it. Lord, I can feel it. I can feel the pain. From the bottom of my heart, I want to say I can feel it. I can feel it. I can feel it. I can feel the pain.
Yourself with Pat Bell Podcast, and thank you for joining our debut. And of course, we want to pay special attention to our sponsors and our supporters. First, we're going to acknowledge Mecca Aqua Massage, which is located in the suburban area of Birmingham. It's the Fairfield community. In the Western Hills Mall, you'll find Mecca Aqua Massage at 7201 Aaron Drive. That's Suite 23. The proprietor there is Stephanie Muhammad. We are so grateful to this local business for joining, catching out this, understanding the importance of saving our lives, rebuilding the community, and restoring people in our communities. This Mecca Aqua has agreed to give our greatest contributor today a gift card for 5 massage sessions and membership. when you send in your contribution to love yourself with Pat Bell today. And what else is with this social media? You're enabling us to send this information to you, your deposit, to we who are going to distance from street community
Go ahead and rock your eyes, cause we're celebrating no more drama in our lives. The great track pumping, everybody's jumping. Go ahead and twist your back and get your body bumping. I told you leave your situations out the door, so grab somebody and get your ass on the dance floor. Let's get it.
Second time, we are going to
In this dancery, got your open, now you're floating, so you got to dance with me. Don't need no hateration, holleration. In this dancery, let's get it percolating while you're waiting. So just dance for me. Don't need no haters. No, we don't need no trying to love one another. We just want you to have a good time. No drama in your life. All nature dies. If you got people, I'm not mine. Be us outside. We gonna celebrate all night. All night. It's fun tonight. No fight. Turn that train right there. Turn it on. Making you dance all night and all night long. Real heat for you this time. It doesn't matter if your wife or doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. 'Cause Mary's back. Let's get it on the phone. Let's get on the phone. In this dancery, we got your open, now you're floating, so you got to dance for me. Don't need no hateration, holleration. In this dancery, let's get it percolating while you're waiting. So just dance for me. Let's get it crunk up on the phone up. In this dancery, we got your open, now you're floating, so you got to dance for me. Don't need no hateration, holleration. In this dancery, let's get it percolating while you're waiting. So just dance for me. Let's get it crunk up on the phone up. In this dancery, we got your open, now you're floating, so you got to dance for me. Don't need no hateration, holleration. In this dancery, let's get it percolating while you're waiting. So just dance for me. Let's get it crunk up on the phone up. In this dancery, we got your open, now you're floating, so you got to dance for me. Don't need no hateration, holleration. In this dancery, let's get it percolating while you're waiting. So just dance for me.
and to Love Yourself with Pat Bell podcast. We're so fortunate to have our DA right here in Jefferson County. Thank you, District Attorney, for agreeing to meet with us today to tell the people why it's so important for community to engage with you. We're fortunate that you're willing to sit down and talk with us so that we can talk to the citizens, to know that you're not our enemy. You're a part of the community. And as we were talking earlier, it seems to me that your upbringing, you had a mother in education, and this tells me this is why you are so attentive to the needs of students and crime prevention.
Yes.
Please, District Attorney, tell us how you have initiated a program to prevent crime.
You know, the one thing that I want the viewing audience to know, and let me first say thank you for having me and thank you for what you do in our community. I've been knowing you a long time, and I appreciate all you've done prior to me being in this position and done since I've been in this position. And I'm honored to have this conversation with you. You know, I think it's important for people to understand and know that as district attorney, I understand inherently that, you know, that job brings a level of scrutiny sometime where either way, whatever decision you make, there's always going to be a side that's not happy, and that's just kind of inherently in the job. But what's important to me is for people to understand that any decision I make, I have an articulable reason for why that decision is made. And I believe when you do that, and when you don't mind articulating articulating the reason why, then you can sleep better at night and you can understand that you're doing what's right. And I believe that a DA or a prosecutor's job is not to count convictions. That's not the job. The job is to make sure that the public is safe, but at the same time, the job is to make sure that justice is served. And sometimes when you use the term justice is not necessarily that a guy go off to prison. Justice is that the right result occur based on a given set of facts. If a guy has a drug addiction, sometimes that means getting drug help could be a sentence. Because if a guy has a mental health problem, sometimes making sure that there are diversion courts in place for people to go get help, as opposed to jail or prison, is the right result and the right answer. And therefore, i.e., that's justice. But let's be frank and clear. If a person grabs a gun and kills someone, clearly that's a different set of rules and a different standard. So based on whatever the given set of facts is, based on what the circumstances are, kind of dictate how justice looks. Now, for me, even when I ran, I talked about being creative in your position. And people ask me all the time, well, you're the district attorney. Why do you do some of the things that you do? Why do you feel the need to be in the community, or feel the need to go to the school and talk to kids, or feel the need to try to tackle the pipeline to prison, feel the need to try to tackle chronic absenteeism in school, feel the need to try to do a second chance job fair for people? I tell them all the time, it's okay to be first. People always tell me, well, you're the first black DA in Jefferson County. That's okay, and I appreciate that. But what's the use of being first if you're not going to do anything?
That's right.
That's the key. So if you're not going to do anything, being first doesn't matter. And for me, going to the schools, talking to kids who look like me, talking to kids who who from the same community I'm from, talking to the kids who basically can see me and say, if he walked these same streets, if he sat in the same public school, and he did this just based on the decisions he made, then maybe I can do it too. And I want to inspire those kids. So we initiated a Helping Families initiative, which is an initiative that talked about and tackled the pipeline to prison.
Right.
Chronic absenteeism. When kids not in school, they're more prone to get in trouble. So we tackled that. We have results here, real results that I'll provide you, that's from one year to the next of how we affected learning time in the community and in the schools. We did a second chance job fair a year ago, had great results, and we did a virtual one yesterday. And we had over 125 job seekers, and we had over 300 jobs available. And so we were able to change lives, and people ask me, why you do this hiring fair? Well, if you want to tackle crime, let me be honest with you, if you truly want to tackle crime, you change the trajectory of a person's life. And when you do that, you empower them. You give them gainful employment. You make sure that they understand and they're able to use that empowerment that they have to affect good change on their family situation and in their community. So we've done a lot, and we're going to continue to push the envelope to the best of our ability. Of course, we have limited resources here, just like everywhere else. We're not funded like we need to be, but we use what we have to try to make sure that we keep our community safe, number one, but at the same time that we give second chances and give opportunities and make sure our diversion courts are working and helping people whenever we can.
Well, how will this budget cut? Is this going to affect you drastically in your performance?
That's a great question, and that's a great question. And I want to give the viewers an example. This is the largest DA's office in the state. Most DA's offices around the state, at most, may have 21 DA's in the office, and that's including the chief deputy and the elected DA. Well, here we're up to 44, and here we have a grand jury every month, and then 1 month we have it twice a month. Most offices around the state do it every quarter, and every month we put about 350 cases on the grand jury in 1 week. So that tells you, and we handled about 9,000 some odd felony cases, not counting 11,000 misdemeanors with 44 people. So it's difficult to cut, but at the same time, the budget Does affect us a little bit, but I would give kudos and props to our county commission. They helped us tremendously. And of course we had to take a small cut, but we did that and we prepared for it. But our people are here. They're still working. They're excited about the opportunity to continue to do what's right in our communities. And it affects us, but we're gonna keep on pounding that pavement. That's what we're gonna do.
So we knew it when I was growing up about truancy, and it seems to me that you kind of upgraded it a little bit by initiating these programs. So this is one preventive measure that you put in place. How do you think, District Attorney, how do we get to the point that we decrease the number of criminals, the number, we have so many exuberant numbers of prisoners.
Yeah.
We want this Love Yourself podcast to be a solution, answers to how we decrease these numbers and improve the communities with stable families.
Yeah.
Is there another suggestion that you have for decreasing criminals?
You know, I believe in providing resources to neighborhoods. I think providing resources and using funding to provide those resources on the front end would decrease our numbers on the back end as it relates to criminal activity, as it relates to young people with guns, as it relates to our jail population, as it relates to the recidivism rates, all the things that we have to deal with. If we put the resources on the front end, then I believe it'll pay dividends on the back end. And when I talk about resources, I'm talking about have the courage to bring some of these grassroots organizations to the table. Because those are the people that are in those communities every day. Those are the people who the people in that neighborhood and that community trust. And we have to embrace that fact and kind of get off our high horse and understand that that's where the rubber meets the road. And we have to embrace that. We have to acknowledge that. And then we have to use that to our advantage to make sure that the people in the neighborhood understand and that we care. And because we're in an elected position, we're no better than the next person. We're no better than the next person. But it takes all of us a concerted effort to fix this. And how do you fix it? You keep kids in school. You provide them the necessary tools that they need. You make sure that people who come out of our prison system have an ID. That's something small, but that is so important. Just getting an ID is huge for them. And you have a second chance job fair for felons, like we just did. And I want to tell you, even a year ago we had 57 employers to register at the Boutwell. And they knew our target audience were people who had been incarcerated. We had 585 job seekers to register. And I think that day alone, we placed about 152 jobs. That is tangible proof that you can effect change if you creatively have the courage to do things that are different. You think outside the box, and you have the courage to deal with the naysayers. You have the courage to implement things that are different. People don't like change. But at the same time, sometimes change is necessary to get the result you want. So that's why things like the job fair, things like my DA's League of Gentlemen that you may have seen that I've implemented with 10 young boys who I've started off with, and we're mentoring them, and they're going through a curriculum. And we're doing a lot of things. We're doing academic tutoring with them. We're doing community service with them. I'm talking to them regularly on the phone with them and their families. We'll assign a specific mentor to each boy. We're meeting monthly. We're doing all types of things with them to expose them to all facets of life. But again, to make sure that they understand that if you can, don't make that mistake.
Now, when you're doing the gentleman program that you've established, are you finding that the majority just don't have fathers in the
Yes.
Is that the situation where most of them have no male dominant figure in their homes?
That is the situation, and so we're trying to close that gap with a mentor and myself. But at the same time, I'll say this, and you know this because you know my story. I mean, it was just me and my mom and my grandmother. But I had a strong mother. But I was from a neighborhood that people say is bad, like Ensley, which is where I'm from. But at that time, we were truly a neighbor. One of my buddies used the term, put the neighbor back in neighborhood. Back then, we were neighbors. I mean, I knew all of my neighbors, and they could discipline me. They can tell me I need to be in the house. It just fostered an upbringing where you saw men leave the house with the lunch pail going to the mine to work. You saw women with their suits on going to schools as teachers or whatever. Nowadays, and I'm still in this all the time, oftentimes I see a lot of people just kind of standing across the street on the corner. And so young people see that. And my granddad always said, you can only be what you're exposed to and what you've seen. And so for me, these young men just have to know that, yeah, it may be tough, but at the end of the day, there are no excuses. Let's not make the excuses. Let's make sure, let's do the work. Let's stay the course. Let's put ourselves in position where we can be the best that we can be. And the sky's the limit if you do that, because so many don't. But they have to be motivated. They have to understand and know that anything is possible if they care about each other, if they love each other, if they work together, and if they pull themselves up from their bootstraps. And we all do our part to foster our communities and our young kids better.
Well, in closing, how long do you think it's going to take to close this gap and bring the numbers down?
I think we have to first make sure that we foster more trust between law enforcement and the community. And that's a hot button topic right now. It's a big topic. People talking about defunding the police and all these things. And I think that term is just a term of indifference for some people. I think what they really mean is divert some resources to the community. If an officer has to go to a crime scene and there's a guy with mental health problems there, then why not try to make sure that you have a mental health expert on call that can come out there and make sure, instead of the result being you have to grab a gun, maybe the result can be that they can use their expertise to talk him down. All those type things, but we have to have more community policing. If a police officer arrives in the community, he's on the beat for 6 months, and nobody on there knows him other than just seeing him ride through with the windows up and the AC on the phone, then that's a problem. Therefore, they won't call nor trust him, because the only time they see him is when the lights on and something has happened.
And he's like an enemy.
He's like an enemy.
Rather than a friend.
Rather embedding himself within the community so they can trust him. All those things are things that we have to put a premium on. And we have, and again, it's different, but we're at desperate times. And sometimes desperate times require desperate measures, and you have to be willing to do things differently to get a different result. And I think that's going to be important going forward.
Oh, thank you so much. We want to appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Again, it was kind of impromptu, like we said. We thought that you would try to work us in,
Oh, yeah.
and as we were saying on our way, we have to be on our best behavior because you know all of us,
Oh, yeah.
all of the community have
Well,
known you for so many years.
Well, I appreciate
So
everybody.
we don't want to let you down.
Well, and I certainly don't want to do that. And I appreciate everybody. I really do. And again, I appreciate you coming to talk to me. I've always appreciated, you supporting your words of encouragement during tough times. Thank you for that. Oftentimes people don't see that, but I appreciate it. And my door is open. And anybody want to come talk to me, please do. So sometimes it gets lonely over here, so I appreciate it.
Thanks again, District
Absolutely.
Attorney.
Thank you. Thank you.
Love Yourself with Pat Bell podcast. This has been a delight bringing you community people, our district attorney, our grassroots people who are standing on the front lines, trying to make a difference. We came to you live from Birmingham, Alabama, where this podcast will be aired monthly, every fourth Monday. And we are doing this for you because we love you, and we believe when we love ourselves, we will love our communities, we will love our churches, and we believe crime will reduce in the Birmingham area, and when crime is reduced here in our largest city in the state of Alabama, other cities in Alabama will begin to improve, and other states will want to improve. We want to be an example of how loving ourselves can bring crime down, build our communities and make them better, reduce the prisons with the numbers of fathers that need to be at home with their children and mothers who need to be home with their children. We're bringing this podcast to you for solutions. We don't want to be the problem. God bless you for tuning in. Stay safe and write us. Send us ideas. Tell us you want to be a guest. We're getting invitations. We're getting requests from all over the nation already. Just when we announced that we were coming on, we started getting requests from all over America, from people who want to be a part of the solution and a part of Love Yourself with Pat Bell podcast. Thank you again for joining.